All right, so I know we are an escapist podcast. We obviously don't get too serious on this podcast, and even when we talk about serious topics, we don't really know a lot, or we don't give a lot of accurate information. But I thought it would be a little bit. I think the word is remiss of us, or irresponsible of us, not at all to mention the fact that it is Remembrance Day. I didn't think about it, but we just happen to record on Wednesdays, and it is Remembrance Day today. And it's not going to be like a Remembrance Day episode or anything like that, and we're not obviously going to dive too deeply onto it because, again, we are kind of an escapist podcast. But I did want to kind of bring up something that has been on my mind that is kind of related to Remembrance Day. It's not really specifically about Remembrance Day, but it is related in a sense. And so Remembrance Day for me has always been a little bit, something that I didn't personally feel like strong emotions towards because, I grew up pretty far away from my ancestors, and I didn't really know anybody very closely involved in the war and stuff like that, and even living the way I've lived, I haven't really interacted with a ton of people who were in any way involved, with the wars and even today, what's going on with military and army and stuff like that. I just don't have a lot of interaction with it, right? So there's always a little bit of a disconnect for me. I mean, I definitely try to be as respectful as I can, and I try to understand the people who are obviously heavily affected by this, and there's nothing obviously I have against it. It's just I never really connected, just because of my personal experience and the way I grew up. I mean, I don't know if you're the same way. Like, are you? I mean, kind of in the same boat. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people in that boat.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you and I, in Pembroke, we weren't that far away from a pretty major military base, and so I
That's a
think
very good point. Yeah.
just in the community, I think growing up, maybe not direct friends, but definitely familiar with folks that are in the military and things like that. So it is interesting, and it's so interesting that a lot of these things didn't happen that long ago, right? Like wars happen
Yeah.
all the time, and it's actually not in the grand scheme of things that long ago. But you're right, like our generation thankfully has been not had a lot of firsthand experience with that kind of stuff, but it wasn't that long ago, right, where the previous generation even in some way probably had a lot more direct kind of impact from wars and things like that.
Right. And I mean, you can even like sense it a little bit as I talk about it now that I'm even very careful with my words because, I mean, that's how much of a disconnect it is for me. Like, I don't really have a ton of experience that I can barely speak about my disconnection from it, right? So it's kind of the thing that kind of came up recently, though, that kind of made me think a little bit, and I talked to my younger sister about this, is that so I was watching on TV. I caught this some documentary series called like The History of Canada or something like that, and I think it's a series where they kind of go through like the various decades. It was almost like CNN used to have this documentary series called like the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, like these kind of things, the 80s, the 70s, whatever. I almost feel like it's something a little bit like that. Like it was a history of Canada, and they're kind of going through the decades. And I think they were going, I want to say like the 90s, the episode that I was watching. So I turned it on because I kind of want to get into the pop culture and all this stuff like that. And so first of all, it really wasn't that. It was some pretty heavy stuff that they were talking about. And one of the things that they were talking about was the peacekeepers and the peacekeeping missions that Canada was a part of. And I don't think it really ever dawned on me that this was a thing and is not really a thing anymore.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, I just always thought, the military was involved somehow in just general peacekeeping. But I guess it was a very specifically defined, like, you are a peacekeeper or whatever, right? And part of this group or whatever. So in the documentary, they had this older guy who was a peacekeeper, I guess pretty early on. So at this point, he's like quite an old guy. And they kind of showed pictures of him, on these peacekeeping missions. And then he went to, then they showed him kind of like what he does today. And again, he's got to be like 80, 90 or something like that. And again, this is one of these things that I don't know the details. So, but what stuck with me is that, so they said, okay, well now like they are interviewing him, I think, and he's saying like, well, now what I do is I kind of go around to schools and I kind of spread the word and tell my story and all this stuff like that, right? Which I think we've all kind of seen and been a part of in some way, right? Like elementary schools or stuff like that, or we watch on TV during like Remembrance Day ceremonies, these kind of things, right? And so I just remember him talking to this group of kids, and obviously the group of kids is not super interested, right? They're kind of just like, they're young elementary school kids, kind of half paying attention, half not. Obviously being respectful to the guy, but not really invested in his story and stuff like that. And so that's when it kind of hit me a little bit, that I was like, whoa, man, I feel kind of bad for this guy, because they were just showing all these crazy pictures of him in these foreign countries and as a young guy, right, kind of doing his peacekeeping mission. And then now he's like this really old guy telling these stories to kids who aren't really paying attention. And I think it was seeing those pictures of him younger, and then not to be pretentious here, but like juxtaposed with him as an old guy telling students the story. That's when it kind of really hit that I realized, like myself, that when I hear these stories and when I hear people talk like this, I don't really like. And again, I was talking to my younger sister about this. I almost like compartmentalize these people, right? Like people who have been in wars and are older now, who dress up in uniforms and tell people about the story. It's almost like, in a bad way, I've compartmentalized them as this is just this group of people, and I don't really connect with them as like human beings that are kind of just like you and me, right? And I think seeing the pictures of him younger on these missions, that's when I really was like, man, these are just people, right? Again, it's a cliche to kind of say something like that, but these are people, and that kind of really connected for me. And I was talking to my sister about this, who obviously but who, for FDK, my sister's a doctor, and she's saying like, the same thing kind of happens a little bit with patients and older patients. You put them in this category, and you kind of have these notions and thoughts and kind of preconceived notions and thoughts about them, and you don't really think of them like kind of a random person that you just meet on the street or whatever, right? And so I guess I don't really have a take-home message here. I mean, maybe my take-home message is really just, if you are like me and you have this disconnect, I think what helps maybe a little bit is just taking a second to think about who these people were when they were your age, or when they're in a place that you can relate to them a little bit more, and that might help you connect a little bit, right? I'm still not there. I still don't profess to be where I should be in situations like this. But yeah, that scene, like this 5-second scene, just really seemed to be like, yeah, that's so weird. I never connected or whatever. So I don't know if you have anything to say on that subject, but I thought I'd just kind of open up with that, as it is Remembrance Day. So
no, yeah, I think it's a good point. Obviously, like you said, we are the least qualified people to talk about this kind of thing. But for everyone who has either family or just respects the day, definitely shout out to that. And I guess this was not planned, but it is Remembrance Day, so
yes. All right. Okay, so just again, just we pay our respects in the best way that we can. So okay, now I mean, I don't know how you transition out of that into our regular programming. But welcome everybody to the ETC podcast, episode 51 on this wonderful November 11th, 2020. Changing the tone a little bit here. We are back. We are one stop shop for entertainment, technology, and cars, and all things random. My name is Casey Lee, and sitting across the city from me, as always, is
Aaron Zedekar.
We are broadcasting to you for the first time with shallow depth of field blurred backgrounds on our video. All right, we start the episode off with an interesting email that we received. So, Aaron, you might think that we are a pretty small podcast. I mean, you probably have that impression, as most people probably do.
Yeah.
And you may think that people don't really care about us and people wouldn't be able to find us. Now, we got an interesting email last week that seems to indicate that we are not as small as we think, but also at the exact same time makes us realize that we are just as small as we think.
Nice. I'm really excited. I hope do we make someone angry? Because I feel like that's when you made it. When we
no,
have,
no. So if we made someone angry, then we would be bigger than we thought. No. So the reason this email makes me think that we're not as small as we think is the fact that these people found us at all and decided to email us. So that's a pretty big deal.
So these are, like, we don't know these people? Because that would be a big deal if we don't know these people.
We don't know these people. We definitely don't know these people.
This is the first time, right?
The first time?
Yeah.
First time. I mean, we might have gotten some spam. I mean, Amazon emailed us, remember? So these people don't know who we are. So that's pretty good, right? They found us. Apparently, we grabbed some attention that they want to email us. So we are not as small as we think we are.
Nice.
But what they wrote us about definitely makes us feel small. So this is what it was. So it's from this guy or girl named Nani, Nani.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say their last name to, protect them or whatever.
Okay.
The subject is create community-based social support networks. Okay, so they have approached us about our YouTube channel. Okay, so YouTube channel, gifts for everyone. Okay, and so it's just a bunch of like Christmas gifts and stuff like that, and say, hey, Christmas is coming, da 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 da. But here's the funny thing. So what they are selling us, this is the packages that they've included for us.
Yep.
Okay, that they've targeted towards our YouTube channel. For views, $2.80. Subscribers, $8. Likes, $1.50. Discovery ads, $4. Watch time, $35. So I guess what they're selling us is we can buy viewership, we can buy subscribers,
right? We
can buy likes, we can do all that if we really want. So yeah. So clearly people who are only in small channels.
Yeah, if our GoFundMe will be up after this, if you wanted to donate.
Yeah. Exactly. It's kind of funny. I've never really come across. I mean, I've been on YouTube. I mean, like for a while, like a couple of channels. I've never had anybody reach out to me like this. This is kind of. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Silicon Valley. There's that episode where Zach Woods was paying a bunch of people to go on to Pied Piper or whatever. So
the like farm, like the like mobile phone. Like,
something. Yeah, I can't remember. To increase their usership or whatever like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So thanks to Nani for thinking that we are significant enough to reach out, but not significant enough to actually have organic subscribership, views, or likes and whatnot. So. All right. Let's get onto the news here. What's on your mind here? What's on your mind?
I mean, there's been another Apple event, which is is there like I'm pretty sure, because they've obviously gone to a new format, but I don't think there's ever been a year with this many Apple events, right?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Year I don't know, but definitely fall season. There's never been this many. I mean,
I think they like the beginning of this year was a little bit quiet, but
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm loving these shorter, more focused events.
Yes.
Compared to how they kind of previously bundled everything together, but that's probably the noteworthy. I don't know if you had anything on your list of things to talk about regarding that event, but.
Well, I think the interesting thing is of all the events this year, and maybe for the last 3 or 4 years, I don't know if it's surprisingly or not surprisingly, but this for sure was the most exciting one for me. Like,
interesting.
I wonder if it's just because like I'm in a buying cycle where I don't really need a new phone, don't really need a new iPad, and none of the features that have been coming out on phones and iPads and all this stuff have been crazy significant to make me be like, oh my God, I need that.
Yeah.
Whereas my computer is super old. Well, not super old. It's 5 years old now. Which is relatively old in computer talk. And I'm actually like seriously in the market for this. So
Yeah.
so FDK, I run a software company, and I'm actually considering getting myself and one of my other staff one of these new MacBooks. So keeping an eye on our finances a little bit. But what I think the most exciting part for me is that, obviously every year there's upgrades. And obviously every year, even with upgrades, the price stays the same. But this seems to be like a significant upgrade and the price stayed the same. Right? Like I was fully expecting that with all the craziness and how much more performant these MacBooks are, I was expecting at least a couple $100 bump in price or whatever. The fact that the exact same price really made that attractive to me, where I was like, man, I should seriously consider getting one of these laptops. So it was definitely, I was pretty pumped. I was like, and again, it might be just the buying cycle I'm in, but I can't remember the last event where I was this excited about it. I guess the iPhone 12 was kind of exciting, but I was pretty excited. How about you? What was your
So I mean, I
thoughts?
guess to recap, for those that did not watch,
Yes.
this
FDW.
event, which I think was 45. It wasn't very long, 45 minutes, was all about Mac, and so they had a few new Mac devices that they announced. But really, what this event was their first big kind of announcements of these new devices with processors and chips and CPUs that they are making now in-house rather than using Intel based CPUs. So super nerdy, but it's a pretty big shift, right? Because for the last, I don't know, when did they switch from the PowerBook architecture? How long ago was that?
It would have been like 2006 or 7, somewhere around there, or maybe 2005. Or
So
no,
which is crazy.
anyway, somewhere
That's
early 2000s,
15 years or something, right? So, pretty big shift because they basically gone from relying on Intel for these CPUs to making their own, which they have done for a while in their phones and iPads and a few other devices. So they're really using a lot of the same processes and technologies from that, and now they're putting it in computers. So, which is a big deal, right? I think the thing about this event was that it's exciting, right? They're calling this new chip the M1, and it's exciting because it's a start of a whole new thing. And what's kind of cool, it seems like they're actually investing now in devices that previously were kind of dead, like the Mac Mini. I feel for a good time period, you're like, are they going to kill that off? Like, what are they doing with this thing? But now it's just because it has this chip, it almost seems like they're like reviving it, right? So I think
Well, not to mention, like, I think one of the interesting things about what happened was that, like, all of a sudden the gap between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro shrunk like crazy, because it's like they're introducing this one chip, right? Like, granted, there's like the MacBook Air has like the 7-core GPU versus the 8-core GPU, but it's basically the same chip. So it's kind of like used to be like some of the big differentiators were like, oh, you'd have like the dual core Intel in the MacBook Air, and then you have quad core, higher clock speeds on the higher end MacBook Pros. But because just the fact that they're introducing one chip today, I know there's going to be more chips in the future, and the fact that they put it in both the Air and the Pro, what's kind of cool about all this, and I think this is like, I don't think we're really going to hit this time again, because unless they transition to something else. But this is probably going to be one of the biggest leaps for the entry level stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even replace the So the one gripe that I have is going on Apple's website. It is a bit confusing going to these product pages what the purchase decision is, because they still have some of the Intel based models. And it seems, and I couldn't really confirm this because, again, our amazing research skills for this podcast. But the higher end, like essentially the higher end models are still Intel based, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I assume, because I don't know why they would be still on the site, but I assume the higher end Intel model is still faster than the lower end.
But this is the interesting thing.
No one is saying for sure, and Apple is not saying for sure. But there are, definitely they are, like, the new devices are definitely lower end by other attributes too, right? Less ports, less less hard drive space, less memory, etc. But this is that weird transition period where they still have like some of the old devices. But it is good that they kind of focus on those entry level devices.
Well, it's crazy too because like I'm very curious to see the tests, like what's going to happen, and my suspicion is that in certain cases, I would not be surprised if the cheaper like M1 actually outperforms the higher end Intels.
Well, I think there's one area that, to be honest, this is for. I mean, this year I have not experienced this because I have not actually. I don't remember the last time I brought my laptop somewhere. But the biggest performance difference is the battery life. I don't know if you saw.
Oh, it's crazy.
Saw the rated battery life, but the numbers don't even seem real. And there's
20,
no way
20 hours on the Pro and 17 on the Air, which is like insane.
And that's just so that alone, right? I think is the main reason to buy one of these. I don't know why you buy. You know, the Intel models, just because, you know, you're getting a few hours better battery life, and that seems to be the killer feature, right? Like I haven't looked really at laptops in a while, but I'm pretty sure there's very few laptops out there that have a 20-hour battery life in that size, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, I think actually it's a good question. I can't remember what they claimed, if it was like the longest battery life in a thin and light laptop, or if it's the longest battery life ever. Because I don't think I've ever heard a claim of 20-hour battery life on anything.
Yeah,
like that.
And and these aren't, you know, these aren't kind of like slow machines, right? Like these are pretty serious. Like they can even the MacBook Air now can run the 6K XDR display that Apple sells, which is kind of insane.
And it can edit 4K.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. It's really like it. I mean, it's kind of one of these things where I feel like just the nature that the technology is completely switched, that it's kind of like, again, light bulbs going to LED light bulbs, right? It's just a completely different technology. I know Apple Silicon's not completely different technology, but I mean, it's like, it's rather than trying to just evolve an existing system, you're going a completely different system, right? And like LED, it's like, it's not too good to be true. It's just a completely different technology, and that's why it's more efficient and brighter. Yeah. Right? Like, how can something lower power be brighter? Well, it's just a different technology, right? And so that's why I wouldn't be surprised if this thing actually outperforms some of the more expensive Intel Mac. And it would be such a great, you know, story like for them to tell. But obviously they can't outright say that, because they don't want to burn their bridges with Intel, and they also have a stock of Intel laptops that they want to sell still, right?
It's definitely interesting. I think you know, again, they've been doing this for a while with their phones and their iPads, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, it's just so interesting how, again, like you said, I think excitement is all relative, right? And I think, you know, if your phone was as old as your computer, I'm sure you would be just excited about the iPhone, like the iPhone event, right? But they've been doing this crazy low power tech, because again, Apple has been, you know, miles ahead in terms of their metric, I think, is how much performance do you get per watt, right? Because anyone can make something fast, right? But making it small and energy efficient at the same speed, that's a big challenge. And so, you know, like, it's almost like we've gotten desensitized to how good their phones and their iPads are. Right? Now that you're seeing that for the first time in computers, it's interesting how, you know, even though it really is not that groundbreaking, because if anything, the fact that like the iPhone 12 Pro Max or whatever is probably still faster than most of their laptops, right? Which is insane. And if anything, that's even more impressive, right? But because that's just like the norm now, and you know, they've been doing that for a while, you know, it's not anything exciting or groundbreaking. But now that you're seeing how big the shift is from you know, like an old architecture to new architecture, right? It is exciting to see that. And again, it's M1, right? Like on the iPhones, what are they up to now? Like A14 or something? Like
exactly.
So I mean, that itself is exciting. If this is the first one, you know, like you know, what is the like 5th, 10th, 20th one going to be like?
But I also think, though, like, I think those jumps are going to feel smaller, right? I feel like the initial, like,
whether they actually are or not, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a perception. Yeah.
Exactly. And I feel like that's why it's kind of exciting right now, is that it feels like ever since pretty much the iPhone came out, every iteration has felt basically incremental, even though they did make some big leaps, don't get me wrong. But this is like kind of like the first like really new thing in computers, like for them for a really long time, because computers have been like, well, I shouldn't say that, because the new Mac Pro was pretty crazy when that came out. That was a pretty big revolution. But like,
Yeah.
I feel like something that's revolutionary that I would actually buy and be able to afford, because I can't afford the Mac Pro, right? So it's like, something that's in the grasp of something that would actually affect my day-to-day life, so it was very exciting. And I feel like right now the next year or so is going to be pretty exciting with all these Apple Silicon chips coming out. And after that, it's going to kind of go back to incremental updates or whatever. Even though you're right, like it could be a massive leap, but it's just that perception of like, wow, what a change, right? That's gone to this, right? So yeah, cool. All right, that is the Apple M1 Silicon chip that I learned this morning is still based on ARM licensing. I didn't ARM license. I didn't realize. I was so confused about ARM and how it fit into Apple Silicon. But I guess they licensed some of the technology underneath.
I think it's not. I mean, it's a different chip, but I actually think it's not that much different than that technology, that architecture they're using in their iPads and iPhones. Like
Exactly. Yeah. No, that is the same. But yeah, there's some underlying licensing that they still have to license out to the ARM people or whatever. So. Again, go look it up, guys. You'll figure it out. We're gonna take a short break, but we'll be right back after this. And we are back on episode 51 of the ETC podcast. It's funny, I forgot who we were for a second there. Before we get onto Aaron's noggin here, I have two transportation related pieces of news. One that's related to your monorail. Your Lego monorail that you brought up last episode.
Nice.
Kind of related, not really. I don't know if you heard they had the first successful Hyperloop passenger test.
Yeah, was that Virgin, right?
Was that what it was?
I think they I don't know how they're like how they're involved, but I think it's Virgin Hyperloop.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It was only like something like 500. It was really short. It was like 500 meters or something like really short. Like so short they didn't have the runway to get up to the speed that the maximum speed that a Hyperloop can get to.
Yeah.
But yeah, very excited about the prospect of Hyperloop. I really hope it becomes a reality. But it's kind of sad to think about things like the Concorde, right? Like the Concorde was something incredible that we had, and I didn't realize that it just died. Like it wasn't economically viable, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that was really ahead of its time, right? Like I think, but I don't know if you heard, it's there's a small startup that is designing another supersonic jet.
Cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, so maybe that, again, we will see that in our lifetimes again. Because again, the technology wasn't the fact that it died because people didn't want to go faster than sound and travel like fly faster. Like everyone wants that. It was just it was straight up cost, right? And so it's just cheaper to fly slower, and people were not willing to pay more money for that, few hours savings or at most. But there's a new company that is promising to kind of do both, making it a lot cheaper to fly at those higher speeds. I forget what they're called. I think Boom. But I will post the link. I think it's called Boom. I think it's the name of the company. I could be wrong, but yeah.
Cool. And then the second piece of transportation news that is probably not really news, but just something that I've discovered. But I bet you everybody who's listening, this is probably really old because I don't. This is in no way news. This is like just Casey discovered it now, so we're calling it news. Have you seen these revolutionary paper airplanes that are effectively just a round tube?
No.
Like literally, I guess people have figured out one of the record-breaking ways to build a paper airplane is to create what's effectively, it almost looks like a gigantic toilet paper roll tube.
Okay, like a cylinder.
Yeah, that's the better word for it. It's basically a paper cylinder, and if you just fold it in a certain structural way, this thing flies like crazy.
So it looks nothing like what you would consider a plane.
No, just a
What
flying
is
cylinder.
what is the definition of a paper
Of a
airplane?
plane.
Because
Yeah,
I feel like in if we were 8 and we were building paper airplanes, like you'd be disqualified.
Yeah.
Like in your 8-year-old group of friends from making that because it doesn't look like a plane.
Yeah, but it's pretty. I've watched a couple of YouTube videos. Unfortunately, most of the YouTube videos that you look up are more about how to make it versus actually seeing the thing fly.
Yeah,
but I've seen a couple of them fly, and it's pretty incredible. So it's a good question. What the definition of airplane is, because you would think an airplane would have some kind of planar aspect to it, right? Not a 3D cylinder to it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
yeah.
So very important transportation news there.
Yeah.
But we are going to move on. We're going to move on to what is on top of Aaron's noggin, underneath his hat, sitting in the bologna in the hat and noggin sandwich of Aaron Sedanker.
Yes, I like how these descriptions evolve. So this is actually something that I think you will find very interesting, and I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts. I'm sure you've seen this, but
all right, I'm you better be right on this.
Yeah, I feel like the last few episodes you already know what I'm going to talk about, but
there's been a couple surprises, and
okay.
Starlink is something now that I'm following because of you. And I don't know if not to derail your bit here, but
the beta is rolling out now.
Canada government has approved it, and now they're sending out Canadian invites or whatever. Anyways, back to your thing.
Yes. So Netflix. I don't know if you've heard. Have you heard this? Do you know what I'm going to talk about?
I have. So number 2 on my list of things to talk about has the word Netflix in it.
Okay.
I'm curious if it's it can't be the same thing. Let me because the thing I have is kind of boring. Let's
okay.
Let's see what you're
going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So Netflix is deciding, and I think this is only in certain countries, to basically do TV. Like,
okay, no, this is not what I had.
You haven't heard of this, okay?
So I had Netflix raising prices. So
okay, yeah, that
a couple weeks ago.
I agree. That is boring and also like really bad news.
Yes.
Okay, so
awesome. This is good news. This is good news.
Yeah, I think it's just in a few countries they're testing this. I think France actually is where they're doing this, but maybe they'll try this in other countries. But basically, what they're doing is they're creating their own TV channel.
That's awesome.
And when I say TV channel, like straight up, full schedule, you cannot basically skip ahead, change. It's literally TV.
Yes. This is what I've been saying, right? I've been saying this for years, that I have a problem with on demand and that it requires active, and this ties in with last episode, right? We talked about the number one device being my TV because it's very passive activity. And the problem with on demand is it always involves this active selection. This is crazy.
Yeah.
How okay, tell me more.
So they're calling it they're calling it direct
okay.
as a channel, but it's essentially I don't know what content they're going to put on here. I don't know if it's going to be multiple channels or whatnot, but essentially there's going to be a schedule of shows and movies that play on this. And if you load it up, it just you just start watching wherever in the schedule is, right? And it's basically like a broadcast, right? And I think I don't know why exactly they're testing this out. They must have some reason, but what I suspect, you and I have talked about kind of like the on demand media versus what it kind of lacks, but this makes a lot of sense. I think Netflix, it's one of those things that makes you realize how good of a product company Netflix is and their strategy, because this is basically I think if you were to start getting into streaming media, it makes sense that you start with on demand, especially when Netflix was doing it, right? That's where the opportunity was. But where do you go once when you basically figured it all out around on-demand things, right? you start now getting into some of the gaps, and I think a lot of people will see this and they're like, oh, like they'll probably make fun of it, right? They'll probably be like, it's like, oh, congrats Netflix, like you invented TV, like good job, right?
Exactly.
But no, it's like it's a really good strategy because again, it's they went after the net new thing first, which is the shift on demand, but that doesn't invalidate, some folks or some maybe just some days you just feel like putting something on.
Yeah.
And you're not like, the point is not you're intending to watch something you already have in mind.
Yep.
The point is something else, right? Whatever that is. Like, you just need to put something on in the background. You just got to waste some time. Like, whatever it is, that's still a legitimate use case, right?
Not to
if
mention,
it wasn't, then why would radio still exist, right? Like,
that's exactly it.
So,
That's 100% it, right? Like Apple has their, like, they have Apple Music, but they have their radio stations, right?
Yeah.
And like, there's a million use cases for it, right? Like pure discovery, like discovering something new, right? Like I find the browse interface, you don't really discover anything because you're very rarely going to actively just decide, oh, because Netflix suggested this new movie, I'm going to play it, right? That's just But like if it's already on, you're going to watch it. I'll tell you what actually excites me about it a little bit too is how kind of traditional broadcast integrates with on demand, because I'll tell you, one of the very interesting things that I've experienced with Ignite TV is so Ignite TV actually has a lot of on demand stuff like in it.
This is a service from Rogers, right?
Rogers, yeah. So, and I'm sure like basically every cable provider now is kind of going this way, right? It's basically IP based TV, right? So you have your regular broadcast cable, but then you have like a really good selection of on demand. Like everything is there. So like, past TV shows, free movies, all these kind of things are in there. And what I find really cool about the way that they've done it is that when you watch something on demand, it basically acts like a channel. So what'll happen is like, I'll throw on like a repeat episode of like Family Guy, right? Because nothing really on TV. But I'm kind of interested in the U.S. election, right? So I'm kind of flipping between CNN and like an episode of Family Guy, right? And what's cool is that because they're like channels, it's like literally as easy as hitting like, oh, back, right? Like, back to the previous channel. So I'm like going between an on-demand video and broadcast TV, right? Whereas normally that would be like, oh, I'm watching broadcast TV, which is its own atmosphere, what's the word I'm looking for? Its own, what the hell's the word I'm looking for? Environment,
like interface or like
its own like infrastructure. I don't know what the word. It's in its own bubble basically, compared to everything else we watch, right? Yeah. Like Netflix, Apple TV Plus, all this stuff is on the Apple TV, but this one piece that's missing is in its own world, right?
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like Bell offers like an Apple TV app, so you can watch TV through the Apple TV and stuff like that.
Yep.
But I really like this idea that like, TV traditional broadcast is not dying, because I do think there's a huge.
Yeah, and I mean exactly what you're saying. I suspect a big reason, they're seeing a lot of advantage in this is because again, it's still gonna be their content, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
Again, it's a discovery mechanism because maybe you're just watching this broadcast and you see something really interesting. It is really awesome that hey, you can just say, oh, I'm going to dive into that, right? So I'm assuming they're going to have some really cool way to like, hey, this is like this is not on demand. Like, this broadcast is live, let's say, or on schedule, but you can dive in from there, which is really cool. Like, I think there's some really interesting things they can do around that. I mean, they did something similar. I don't know if you've noticed recently, but have you seen the play something button appear on Netflix?
I haven't actually. No.
So I have it now on my Sony TV. So I don't know if they're only rolling out to certain devices or clients right now, but before you go into, you select your account. Before you do that, you can just hit that and it just plays something, right? And so it's not a broadcast because it starts from the beginning. But again, I think they realize that because they've been so successful with the amount of content they have now, there's almost this really weird paradox, right? Of you just can't decide what to watch, right? And
exactly.
And I think 2-3 years ago, this probably wasn't an issue as much, right?
Yeah.
When they had less content. But now they have so much content that I think they're trying to figure out ways to solve for this. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I'm really like I not that I am really wanting to like watch this like regularly, but I just want to see how it works. Like it'd be really
Yeah.
interesting to see how they what they do with this.
Well, it's so funny. Like it really speaks to how desperately I've wanted this. Like, I don't know. Do you remember? It was a couple of years ago, maybe as recent as last year. There was this show that Netflix produced that ended up being an April Fool's joke. It was like Will Arnett talks about regular day things or something like that. And so literally it'd be like a shot of a microwave.
Yeah.
And Will Arnett would just rant about this microwave basically. And then it would be something like a toaster and he would just rant about a toaster. And what was crazy is when you hit play, it was like in the middle of it. Like there was no beginning or end or whatever. So this thing came on. I was like, oh my God, this is like really funny.
Yeah.
Is this thing just going to be running all the time that we can just tune in at any point?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've always been a really big advocate of it. I'm still a big fan of cable for that reason, and so I'm happy.
Yeah.
You're right. You got this. That was a pretty interesting piece of news.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens, but I mean, I think in general, like this, I think there's definitely some like Netflix is really good at just experimenting with things like this, right? Like I think if you look at all like there's a lot of streaming services out now, right? Like there's I mean I'm subscribed to probably like 4 or 5, which is insane to think about. But like you don't see anyone else really kind of pushing. And this again, like this sounds weird because people will just make fun of Netflix for just reinventing TV. But hey, no one else is really doing that, right? And they've done some really cool things. Like I don't know if you've played around with any of their like interactive like choose your adventure type things. There's been a few. There's been a few that Netflix has done. It's like really interesting. But yeah, like it's I think a year or two ago with Disney emerging and all these streaming services, people were like, it's like, oh, like Netflix like is like is at risk and whatnot. But if anything, like I feel like at this point, because again, I subscribe to quite a few of these, and I don't know, between content and just the way that they are adding features and things like Netflix is still so far ahead of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And it's surprising because you have these companies like Disney, which if anyone is going to compete against them, right, it would be a company like Disney.
Yep.
But like outside of 1 or 2 shows, maybe I watch on Disney, and again, I am a grown adult, not a child, so I'd probably have a very different viewpoint. But yeah, Netflix just blows like everything else out of the water.
But I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, Netflix has like I don't know how much of a head start on these other companies, right? Like a decade or two, and not to mention. Like it's kind of like Tesla, right? They are a good software company at heart, right? They know,
and that's their core mission, right? Whereas Disney, like they've done a great job with their streaming service, but their core mission is their media and their content, right? Like what they do as Disney, not becoming the best streaming service in the world, right?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, you think about all these companies, right? It's like Google, is getting into the hardware game, over the last couple of years, but Apple has like 20 years on Google on that, 30, 40 years, however much head start on that. And that's still Apple's core, like not their core business, but it's what they're really good at. Now flip that, Google's really good in the advertising search game and they're really good at the online service game, and Apple's playing catch up on that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like Netflix, like you said, it was a kind of a core software company that then started to get into content creation, right? Disney was a content creation company in the first place, and then they kind of, all right. So it's like what Netflix is going to excel at makes sense, right? It's kind of like product design, and that's goes a lot further than the UI, right? It's all about like the feature set and how they're going to lead the industry, right? I was always surprised to find out. And I still have to corroborate this. Corroborate's the wrong word. I still have to confirm this. But because I thought for the longest time that Netflix was a company that was doing on-demand DVD mail-in stuff that realized a opportunity in the market and then shifted to Netflix streaming. But I am now hearing from people like you, our friend Gus, like people that their mission always from the beginning was online streaming. It's just the internet wasn't there yet and the technology wasn't there yet. And so they started with mail-in DVDs and we're just waiting for the time to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And so
I don't know for sure either.
Yeah.
But did you know at least last time I checked, maybe this was like a few months back, they still have another company that I don't know if it's, I think Netflix owns them or whatnot, but you can still rent DVDs, physical DVDs.
Okay. I did not know that.
Did you know this? Like
no.
Yeah, so it's not like directly from Netflix, but it's basically their company.
Oh,
and so
crazy.
like I don't think it's available in Canada. This might only be in the US and maybe only certain parts of the US.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that still is alive. There's still people out there that
that's
for whatever
crazy.
reason want to rent a DVD, and it's a mail service. Like you get it through mail. So I don't know if it's still running, but
Yeah.
a lot of information we're not very sure of. But yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of this kind of pretty cool video. Did I ever talk about the Linus Tech Tips video where he went to visit his grandfather to show him technology these days? Did I ever talk about that? Okay, so anyways, there's this. I think I want to say it was for Father's Day or something a couple of years ago or something like that. So Linus went to visit his grandfather. And he went to kind of show him like what technology is like today. And so he kind of showed him on his phone, like, oh, and here you can rent a movie. And then his grandfather asked, okay, so now will it be ready at the store for me? And he's like, no, you can watch it right here. And it was just like this like crazy moment of his grandfather experiencing like modern tech, for the first time. So it's pretty crazy. Okay, we are coming to a close here on this very in-depth episode of the ETC podcast. I feel like we covered about 3 topics today, actually. But that's what you get. That's what you get with the ETC podcast. If you guys have any questions, comments, and concerns, be sure to email us at podcast.etc@gmail.com, or you can follow us at the ETC podcast on Twitter, and don't forget to check out our YouTube channel. Before we go, I do want to mention one very interesting piece of news, because this is a problem I've been dealing with for a pretty long time, and they finally solved it, which is pretty sick. And I'm sure it's a problem that you have, and maybe a couple other people that we know have. So for years now, I've always wanted a Porsche that matches my private jet. I've owned my private jets, for years, and I've never had a Porsche that matches my private jet.
Yeah, I mean, you could get one, but it wouldn't be the same color. And
Exactly, man. It's just like it's so stupid. Like it's like Netflix taking so long to figure out this thing. I don't know why it took them so long. So I don't know if you've heard, but you can buy a Porsche to match your private jet.
I did see that. That's it's just like this year has been like I feel like if you had a bingo card with these things at the beginning of the year, and one of the items was what's the company, the jet company?
I had it written down, but
whatever it is, right? Like if something on there was like, there's going to be a global pandemic. And by the way, and the economy is going to be down. And by the way, you can also buy a private jet with a matching 911 turbo. It's like, what?
People
what is
people are going to
happening?
be losing their jobs.
Yeah,
people are dying.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you can finally get your Porsche. Like I didn't even read much about it. Is it like a package deal, or is it like literally like the Porsche is branded similar to the jet? Like what's the do you know?
I think you like. I don't think you can. So I don't know about the jet, but I know that I know the car, which is 911 Turbo S, which is basically one of the top models that Porsche sells. You can only get in that particular configuration. Like there's specific paint and wheels and things like that, but you can only get that if you buy it with that jet.
With that jet.
So not that this car doesn't exist. You can't buy it in that specific color and options unless you get it with that jet. And I don't know if that's the same with the jet. Although I suspect that that this works again the jet I think is like 10 million. Right? And the car is expensive, but it's not 10 million. The car is like 200,000-300,000. So I feel like this is more of a one-sided thing where it's a bonus for like if you're spending 10 million on a jet, it's
You're
a
a jet
bonus.
owner.
So you got
Yeah.
you
It's
can
not-
buy
it's
this yeah.
It's not really for the Porsche owners out there. It's really for the jet owners.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, again, can't like, thank God, like next to the M1 MacBook Airs, like this jet Porsche combo is really where my money's going next. So
yeah.
all right, that is it, guys. Again, like I said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, be sure to email us at podcast.etc@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at the ETC Podcast. You can also leave a voice message on our official website, anchor.fm/the-etc-podcast. The ETC podcast is currently hosted on anchor.fm and distributed to all your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Google Podcasts, and more. We really like the correspondence that you guys give us. Tweet us. There's been a lot of traffic that's been happening, which is really great. But we still have 2 YouTube videos that actually have 0 views. It will be amazing to see how long we can keep those videos at 0 views. Yes,
I didn't think that is even possible anymore. But
I know, right? It's almost like I was thinking about this the other day about making a YouTube video literally called like "Don't Watch This" and see how long it could go at 0 views. I'm sure people have done it before.
yeah, you would not believe what happens when you watch this.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, but that is it, guys, for episode 51. That's 2 times 25 plus 1, or 60 minus 9. Don't forget, that's also 100 minus 49, and it's 51 out of 100 episodes at some point. Me and Aaron have finally decided, by the way, that this season is going to be coming to an end. We only have a couple episodes. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Definitely wasn't a 30-second conversation. But we are going to be ending this season at the end of this year. So we're going to finish off November. So that's 2 or 3 more weeks. And then we're going to do a Christmas special to end off the season. But don't worry. We will be back next year, whenever we decide to get back on. But it won't be an 8-year hiatus again. Things have been going pretty well. All right, guys, that is it for episode 51 for this wonderful Remembrance Day, Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. Obviously, all due respect to everybody who fought for our freedom and give us the lives that we have today. So thank you very much. All due respect going out to that. But that is it, guys. Episode 51 for your one-stop pod for entertainment, technology, and cars. My name is Casey Lee, and sitting across the city from me, as always, is
Aaron Tenekar.
We'll see you guys next week.
Go watch some Netflix TV.